I was offered 25% over asking, and I politely said no interest, because a lot of people don't actually own the shares. They don't even understand what they own.
And we're looking back and we go, did we get it right or did we get it wrong?
If you would have told me 5 years ago we would have $1 trillion valuation on a company, I would have looked at you and said, Dalton, are you insane? I'm not at 72%, but I'll take my bet up to 68%. I am betting $1 million, yes, it will happen.
I'm contrarian on the fact is that the optics don't add up.
And we're still in the infantile stages of AI. I would run as fast as I can to go public for a lot of reasons. I'm right and you're wrong.
David, we're here today to make a bet, and that bet is on the question of, will Anthropic officially announce an IPO in 2026? Right now, the Kalshi prediction market has that probability at around 72%. What that means is that if somebody takes the yes, they will IPO in 2026, they'll make around 30% on their money. If they take the no and they win, they'll make rough 300%. Based on these current predictions. You're somebody that has invested in 15 companies that have gone on to IPO, including SpaceX, as well as a investor in Anthropic. I want to know, do you think that this 72% that we have on Kalshi is realistic, or is it a little bit delusional based on your experience?
Well, Dalton, there's a lot of different philosophies that go into making these decisions. You know, it's around the market. Is the market experiencing boom or bust? So if I was a betting man and I'm thinking about the Kalshi bet, I'm going to go a little bit under. I'm going to say it's probably the 60 to 65% chance of them going public.
And why do you have this as the bear case?
Because SpaceX IPO has not performed as well as expected. In the very beginning, the stock went up to $225. Now it's trading down about $108. They announced earnings the other day. They blew out earnings, but CapEx was very expensive.
Anthropic filed their S1 confidentially, their draft S1.
Yep.
And in order for anyone to win this market, one of three things needs to happen. The S1 has to go effective,
Yep.
the IPO has to be priced, or they need to be assigned a ticker by one of the major securities exchanges. And so my question also is, Anthropic just raised $65 billion a couple of months ago. They filed this draft S1 in June, but right behind them also was OpenAI. And right now, OpenAI, their probability of announcing an IPO in 2026 is around 25%, 50% difference. Why is there such a huge difference between both of these when they're at the same exact stage in their IPO preparation process?
It comes down to strategy. It comes down to the board. It comes down if they need the cash. Companies are staying longer privately,
right,
because they get to buy as much time as they need.
Right.
But some companies are forced to go public. I'll give you a perfect example. Lemonade. SoftBank, largest investor. They told them no more capital. Lemonade ended up going public because they were forced to go public. So it's really a question of how much cash is on the balance sheet, what is the goal of the company, and do they want to have that public spotlight? If you look at SpaceX as an example, I think they started around 2005, 2006. They were private for almost 20 to 21 years.
Right. And Anthropic just launched in 2021. So in an era where companies are staying private longer, they're staying for longer than 10 years. We're looking at Stripe, we're looking at Databricks, we're looking at SpaceX and many others. Why would somebody bet that Anthropic's going to do it in 5 years rather than spending 10 or 15 years?
Well, right now we're in an AI boom. This past weekend, I was at the University of California in Berkeley at an AI conference, and the rationale behind going public is if you look at the spend is where the problem is. Everyone's worried about the spend. And if the numbers at Anthropic are fabulous, which they are, I can't tell you what they're going to do. I can only predict. And I look at it from the perspective of, okay, slow the mechanism down. First of all, we're in August, so it's very slow right now. The IPO market is always open for business. It just matters how the performance of the stock market's performing, because people just will stay private longer, because if you can raise capital, you don't need to go public. But the Anthropic story has been meteoric from nowhere to everywhere.
What the fun piece about this is that with prediction markets, there's a yes answer and there's a no answer. Those are the only two options. We're not betting on probability percentages because there are companies out there that will beat earnings and then the next day you'll see that their stock goes down. The beauty of the prediction markets is that you make your bet, and at the end of the bet, at the end of the timeline, or at the end of the rules, is that you see it convert into yes or no. You get paid if you were right or if you were wrong. And so today, what we're trying to figure out is if we're putting our names and our faces on the line, we're looking back at this in 2027, and we're looking back and we go, did we get it right? Or did we get it wrong? And what are the things that happened? And so one of the things that I think is a good topic to bring up is the founders. I mean, who are the people that are making this decision to go IPO, that are going to say, hey, we are going to make the S1 effective?
Well, it always boils down to the management team and the board and them sitting in the room. And I'll use a term called a Ouija board. You put a Ouija board up, you put the pluses on one side, the minuses on the other side. That's like Ben Franklin. That's what he used to do. And then you have to evaluate how is the sentiment of the market. Now, what SpaceX did, which I thought was brilliant, and most people don't know this, they went to all the Tesla shareholders and they offered them shares in SpaceX. Then they went to Main Street and offered them. And the other thing that SpaceX did, and I'll get to your question, is they're on the QQQ. And what the QQQ is for SpaceX to do is to allow them to bring stock in slowly. Look, with Anthropic, I'm a big believer that they will go public, but I wouldn't bet at a 72% hurdle that it goes public by the end of this year.
You know, one thing I also want to know is, not to put words in anybody's mouth, but looking at two of the biggest co-founders of Anthropic, we're looking at Dario and then looking at his sister Daniela. Would they keep Anthropic private forever if they could, you think?
I think everyone wants some type of liquidity event. I know we have a secondary market,
right,
and they're pricing the company right now at $965 billion. The secondary market is over exuberant on it, pricing it up by probably another 20 to 30%. Look, I'm sure that they're smart enough, because I've seen other founders make horrible mistakes and borrow against the float of their stock and go broke. I'll give you a perfect example with Peloton. So I'm hoping Dario and Daniela are smart enough taking some chips off the table.
Well, they could be, and through other means, through a tender offer or other things of that mechanism. I'm looking at this and I'm trying to paint the picture, trying to look at the story, and you see that they just raised $65 billion at a $965 billion valuation. So they have cash, but also, if you see from internal resources, maybe other podcasts, other sources, they're on track to get to maybe over $100 billion run rate in 2026 alone and hit profitability. So if you're somebody that's going, hey, they have plenty of cash, it seems like, and now they have the time to wait for the perfect time. So it's kind of, when is the perfect time? Is it going to be in 2026? Is it going to be later?
Well, it goes back to the market sentiment. We always have to look at the markets. I'll give you a perfect example of a company that I was a founder of. They were supposed to go public in 2022. After studying the markets, they spent $7 million at JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs. And the problem was the market was evaporating. We were in a decline. You always want to go when there's an upswing and the mood is positive, and we're still in the infantile stages of AI. I would run as fast as I can to go public for a lot of reasons, because you'll know a lot more about your company. Look, and it all boils down to CapEx. How much are they spending to grow the business? Do they need the money? You bring up valid questions, and that's why you have to kind of put the switch on and off. They filed the S1 confidentially. They're doing all the right things. The grumblings in the market is it's going to happen, but there's always an expectation. But then you have to look at the negative. You have to look at the bear case, and you have to say to yourself, does the market react positively to us? Where is the sentiment? Because yesterday, Billion to One announced their earnings, and I was an early investor in Billion to One. Their earnings were fabulous, trajectory strong. They got hammered today. Stock was trading at $150. It's down to $95 today, down a little over 30%.
It's been a hard market, I think, this year for a lot of different companies in the AI world and space. And now we're seeing with SpaceX, we're seeing with the company that you just mentioned, Billion to One, how they're being treated. When I look at the 72%, the only, I think, main things that to me look like there's any sort of probability are, one is that they just filed their draft S1, right? I feel like so many people are just putting so much weight into that draft S1, but then also to me is you're involved in the secondaries markets. Maybe a lot of people here that are listening to this know that their mom, dad, uncle, friends want to get Anthropic at whatever price. They'll do layer 5, 7, 9, 10, 8 SPVs.
You know, you bring up a good point, Dalton, and I love what you just brought up about the different layers. The layers of complexity is what I'm going to call it.
Yep.
Because a lot of investors and Anthropic just put the gauntlet down on this because a lot of people don't actually own the shares. They don't even understand what they own. So to me, when you look at stuff, and I love the country club theme of I own Anthropic, I'm the man.
Sure, add it on your LinkedIn. I think there's another factor that you just mentioned in terms of who owns the company. And we're actually talking about one of the most unique things with Anthropic is that they're not just a public benefit corporation. Great, there's plenty of other companies that are public that have done that, but they also have this long form trust, and where there are 5 people that have no financial incentive to Anthropic that are making huge decisions. So at the end of the day, if you're an investor or you're even a founder, I mean, what do you own? How does this work?
I want to bring another point into this because you just brought up something that is really important. Who owns the company?
Right.
How many public companies have invested in Anthropic? You have Google and many others.
Sure.
So think about the bet they made. Think about how their stock will perform. So there's a lot of rationale behind thinking through all the moves. Does Anthropic need to go public? The answer is no. They don't have to, based upon the facts that we have, that they're going to be profitable. They're moving through a process. They're only 5 years old, and they're in a great position. If you would have told me 5 years ago we would have $1 trillion valuation on a company that's 5 years old, I would have looked at you and said, Dalton, are you insane? I would have asked that question, are you insane?
We've already identified the 2 biggest things where people are saying, okay, I'm starting to see why there might be 72% probability, but there are so many other things that go into the other 28%. Another thing you mentioned is the government, right? The Anthropic has been under government investigation, pushback all year, and coming up on September 30th, which could also be another government shutdown for the SEC. So how does that play in? That's in less than 60 days. How does that play into the equation?
See, Dalton, you're very smart because you're thinking about it all the right ways. And with a government shutdown, we could certainly have, disruption. The market typically don't perform well when there's a government shutdown because remember, everything is momentum until the numbers are real.
Sure.
When you look at SpaceX, I think their revenue was up tremendously, but their CapEx was up tremendously as well. And that's why the stock got hit. So you got to be very mindful and look through and say, okay, where are we at that point? Because the government shutdown could definitely affect it. The markets could definitely affect it. The overseas markets could definitely affect it. The regulatory environment could definitely affect it. Look at Kalshi. They're getting sued right now in New York. So you don't know. I had a company that ended up going public called FanDuel that the Attorney General basically shut down, and they went through a war for several years. They ended up winning the war, and Flutterwave ended up buying, FanDuel. So it's not in our hands is what I'm going to tell you. And that's why it's a bet. That's why we're making the bet. If I had a listening device and I was in the management room, I'd be able to give you a lot more information. But I agree that when you look through the lens and you start to study everything and your goal is to go public, you're not spending this capital. You're not working with Morgan Stanley or Goldman Sachs. You're going to do this. It's just a matter of timing. And as I said this earlier, the IPO market is always open.
I'm glad that you said that because you have invested in 15 companies that have gone on to IPO. I would love to hear what if all 15 of them went through this similar timeline of drafting their S1, waiting 60 to 90 days, it going effective, and then them going public, or are there cases where that didn't happen?
Yeah, it works both ways because you go in a quiet period, you got to make sure that you're dotting your I's and crossing your T's. And it's also the market that will dictate what's going to happen. Some companies are oversubscribed like SpaceX, and then some companies are not oversubscribed. So then they have to go back and say, okay, we did our best efforts does it make sense to push the button and go public? I'll give you a perfect example, Compass. Now, I'm not an investor in Compass, but I watched Compass set themselves up as a real estate tech company, and they ended up going public and they got hammered. So you have to have the right perspectives. If the long term of the company is very profitable, and there's lots of outs. You could sell the company, you can merge the company, you can IPO the company. Most companies don't go to the IPO market because it's a different dynamic and a different structure. Most companies sell to a third party that is either going to do an M&A transaction, but the public markets, what they're looking for, they're more apt at looking at momentum on the cap table, who's on it, who's buying the stock, what are the forward-looking earnings, and that's how people make decisions.
Another question you could perceive this is, what are the risks to Anthropic not announcing their IPO in 2026?
All right, so here's a perfect example. Kraken missed the window.
Okay.
Kraken should have gone public. I know they had regulatory hurdles just like Anthropic had, and they missed their window. I'm an investor in Anthropic personally in my fund as well, and to me, they missed the window because we went into a crypto winter. It's always a market reaction, Dalton. And the thing you have to understand, and I say this wholeheartedly, and I really believe with all my heart, you got to make a lot of bets. You can't just put all your eggs in one basket. Like it's Don Quixote theory, diversify the basket and make enough bets. Because look, if you're going to make a bet on that it's going to go public, and look, I'm not far off from that expectation. And I've done a lot of research and I've read a lot of the reports. And the only reason I'm a little bearish more than what the prediction markets are saying is I've been through this.
Sure.
I know what happens.
Missing that slot, missing that time window.
It's always the window. It's always the window.
Absolutely, because you see other competitors from China, like DeepSeek, right, and Moonshot, and how that's been affecting things. And then you're also looking at the biggest partner to, probably one of the biggest partners to Anthropic, which is SpaceX, but also with Alphabet, right? They are partners.
Well,
they do business together.
Alphabet owns part of.
They're an investor.
Anthropic,
They're an investor, yeah. And so I think they're also an investor in SpaceX, right?
Yeah.
So they're pretty good investors.
But you just said something that really makes me think. Now, does Google have enough power and the ability to talk to their board and say, go public? Because what happens to Google stock? If it does well, Google stock will go up. We're really in an aircraft right now, and it's going to Mars.
So if you're an investor in Anthropic's most recent round in May, invested $65 billion at a $965 billion valuation, they did the draft one. Let's say that November or December of this year, they officially announce their IPO, the S1 goes effective, they go on the road and they start raising money to go out and go public in 2027. And then from there, how long are the shares locked up for these most recent investors before they could sell?
Well, it depends upon if they're going to, I would imagine the QQQ will mandate the same terms to Anthropic. So they're going to get dispersed over a 6-month period of time. The normal lockup is usually 6 months. And if you're more strategic and involved in the company, it could actually be even longer.
Certainly. So I'm thinking about it from the investor's perspective, because they invested 4 days later, they draft the S1, right? They could have done it as a teaser to see, hey, how are things going to look in the investor's eyes with this trust structure that they put in, right? Yeah. But then also they could also be saying, hey, Anthropic is 3xing in valuation basically every 8 months, it feels like. So they're going, hey, if we do this now in June, we announce the IPO in November or December, we actually do the IPO in Q1 of next year, and then we have 6 months lockup. Now we're a full year after this. That $1 trillion valuation could be $3 trillion.
I'm not going to tell you I have a crystal ball and a lens. I'm going to tell you the market will price it on momentum. The market will price it based upon quarterly earnings. The market will price it on CapEx. They look at every perspective, Dalton. So I'm not going to tell you I have those answers because I'm not forecasting. But if I'm a long-term holder, I'm picking SpaceX over Anthropic every day of the week. Just to share with you, I told you I was at 60 to 65%. I'm actually going up based upon what you said. I'm not at 72%, but I'll take my bet up to 68%.
That's why we come to Betting the Future, to have these discussions, to learn something, but also to find a market edge where nobody can. The beauty that I've told you before is that AI cannot predict the future 100% right of the time. And that's one of the things that I think is so fun about this, is we can come on here, learn something new, use a human edge, try to tell a story, and try to see if we can beat AI. I wonder what happens if Anthropic were to go and have their IPO and be massively successful in their IPO. Would that be then, okay, now it gives OpenAI a turn to meet their window? Or if they go and they have an IPO and they has the opposite effect? So that's what I'm trying to say about the weaponization of it is,
Exactly.
SpaceX, Elon Musk is very much against Sam Altman. So is Dario. So is, I think, almost every big AI leader. So I'm wondering if Anthropic has all of the money in the world and the biggest backers in the world with Alphabet, right? I wonder if they all come together and they're making the computing deals with SpaceX and everything like that, and they're going to go, hey, we're just going to bleed OpenAI dry.
You know what, Dalton? There's always going to be a conspiracy theory. There's always going to be people that are going to be against you. Look, I don't know enough to tell you. I don't sit inside that ecosystem, so I can't forecast that. But what I can tell you is if Anthropic does not do well, if they go public first, then OpenAI could sit back and wait. So look, I always say when you go to the movies, you see all these trailers. So when you blink, someone's going to make that decision and go, and we're going to learn a lot about them. The storyboarding is right for both of them. One's more complicated than the other. OpenAI's structure is a lot different than Anthropic's structure.
Totally. Yep.
So, and you also have to remember Microsoft. You have to remember Apple. Apple's done nothing to pounce on this yet. They're sitting with a war chest of over $1 trillion. There was a bet made during the Super Bowl that someone would run onto the field. And I think the guy bet $5,000 to win 250 grand. You know who ran on the field,
He was that guy.
He was the guy. You know what the fine is? $1,000, I think.
$1,000.
And you're banned from going to any more NFL games.
Worth it.
I think so, too.
Who do you think most wants to see Anthropic IPO, and who least wants to see Anthropic IPO?
Well, the investors definitely want to have liquidity. The institutions want liquidity. Everyone who goes to the country club, the big buzzword many years ago, I'm in this pre-IPO of Facebook. So people love telling those stories.
But there is liquidity out there. I mean, the secondary market is as hot as it's probably ever been for any company other than SpaceX, probably, maybe even hotter.
I was offered the other day to sell my Anthropic shares.
Right.
And I laughed because I'm in at really good valuations and I have a lot of patience. I was offered 25% over asking, and I politely said no interest.
Would you be comfortable holding your Anthropic shares for the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, there's no reason to sell.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. So if there's no reason, for the incentives, for the liquidity, you can say liquidity, but there's so much liquidity in the secondary markets. It doesn't seem like people want to sell. It almost feels like the founders themselves don't, are able to get liquidity if they want to for part of their shares through tender offers and all these things. So it really comes down to me, that window, but maybe I'm wrong. With Kalshi, after the draft S1 was filed, you saw the prediction markets bring this up to around 91%. Now we're down today at 72%. Time is almost essentially killing this prediction market, or the ones that were betting on it.
Right.
Again, we're coming up to the third month of after they've drafted it. We're going into September 30th with possible government shutdown. We have holidays coming up. We have to go through the trust. There's a lot of different things. I want to understand, at what point in time does it flip for you that you're now under 50% bullish on this, going at what date?
You got to understand that the markets are very fluid. So if we see a course correction in the stock market, then my bet's going down. Because if the market dips significantly, it's not the right time. But maybe it is. There are companies that are going to have to go public in the next 2 years because they're supported by this administration.
But is Anthropic one of them?
Well, I think Anthropic is not well liked by the government.
That's what I'm saying. Are they going to allow them to do it?
See, Dalton, you bring up another perspective. The government might be a little bit afraid because when they announced their mythos and then they did the whole cyber attack to show how vulnerable everyone is, I'll say Salesforce might be scared. You have other companies that might be scared of them going public.
Right.
Because they then become like all these vertical SaaS companies. Are they in trouble if they're not using AI? The answer is yes. And that goes back to my point from before. A day now in my book is a year.
So I guess it would almost be irrelevant if the government doesn't approve of it or not, because all it takes to win this prediction market is for the S1 to be effective. So after the SEC has reviewed, let's say they give the thumbs up and now Anthropic goes, hey, we want to turn the button on and it's effective, bam, we win the market, right? It doesn't matter if after the fact, the administration comes back and says, we don't like this, whatever, it doesn't matter. We have already cashed in our 30% if that happened.
I love that. I love the model. I think the model's a great model where you can make these predictions, make these bets. Now, is this gambling? I'm going to say yes.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is not financial advice. We have no insider information. This is gambling. Do your own research. Hopefully coming on here gives you a better perspective and insight into this market. But yeah, definitely gambling. SpaceX and everybody's going to be using this recording to train their models to try to figure out how to predict the future correctly.
It's funny
if we're right or even if we're wrong.
No, it's funny you say that because one of the things I did is I went to OpenAI and I asked OpenAI for their prediction. And then I went to Anthropic and asked for their prediction. And then I read some articles and that's how I came up with my thesis. So remember, you can go do homework in a lot of places. It depends what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
You know, are you doing artwork? You know, does Canva become irrelevant? I have questions around this whole
Figma. See what happened to them with the Anthropic. Yeah.
What happened? Didn't they?
They launched Claude Design, and right overnight is when Figma lost. It was like, I think 40% the next day because Claude Design was that good. So David, for this last segment, I want us to look into the cameras and give our prediction on what we think is going to happen and why. Again, it's got to be a yes or a no on what we think. If will Anthropic officially announce their IPO in 2026? We'll start it off with you. If you had a fund and you had $10 million raised, you make a $1 million bet on this, what would you make and why?
That's a really good question, and I want to be very thoughtful. I probably wouldn't bet. I probably would just take my chips and go home. I'll tell you, my mindset is I don't gamble. Am I a risk taker? The answer is yes, but I like risk management, and I don't like bets like that because zero or hero. My mindset would to be diversify my portfolio, have a lot of different blue chip names from Databricks to SpaceX to OpenAI to Anthropic to all these wonderful companies. I just wouldn't make that bet.
We're going to have to make a bet in order to record this. And so if there's another way that you want to position it, you're welcome to. But at the end of the day, it's got to be, we want to be able to look back on this. And there's plenty of markets that we wouldn't want to bet on, but we brought you on today. We bring everybody on today to bet the future, right? I understand. So we got to have some sort of conviction here.
So if I was going to bet,
yes,
I wouldn't bet $1 million first of all.
Okay.
I would change.
You're changing the whole rules of the question.
Shoot. Okay. Let me
look at the camera.
Let me
okay, so you have $10 million, you have $1 million to bet. That's 1/10 of your fund to be betting on this one thing. You have to make the bet, yes or no. You can't liquidate it at a lower probability or high probability. You leave it. This money is not going anywhere.
I have no problem with it. So if you're forcing me to give a prediction.
Absolutely.
All right, here's my prediction. I bet $1 million it happens in 27.
But when did the announcement?
Announcement will happen in 26.
In 26. So you're betting yes, it will happen in 2026.
I am betting $1 million yes, it will happen. Because based upon my numbers, I gave you, 60 to 65%. I went up to 68%. So
you found more conviction over it.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you understand how casinos work, their pinpoint is about 1 to 2%. So the house always wins 51 to 52% of the time. So if I'm going to make the bet, it's a 68% yes, definitively, it will happen in 2026.
Basically, you're betting $1 million to win $300,000. This is coming from an angel investor and venture capitalist who usually goes, hey, I want to go bet and get 10x, 100x, 1000x.
Wow.
I was kind of thinking that maybe you'd go shoot for if you have the 10 different bets to make, that you'd be going maybe for the 3x.
Dalton, I love your perspectives. The questions were really articulated and well thought out. Here's my question to you.
All right.
You have $10 million to $100 million to bet.
Let's go with $100 million.
Let's go with $100 million.
Okay.
What are you doing?
Out of only $100 million, or how much money do I have overall?
You can make the bet up to $100 million.
But let's say that I'm a trillionaire. So with the meaning of it. So I'm trying to understand.
Wait, you invented SpaceX and OpenAI and Anthropic together?
Guilty. No, but what I'm trying to understand is also because risk based on how much you have is different. That's why I asked you. You had 10 million, you bet 1 million.
Yeah.
That risk profile. So tell me, is it the same question?
Yeah, same question. I'm just teasing you. But you have 1 to 10 million. You could make a $1 million bet. What's your bet and why?
If I had $10 million, or if I had a $10 million fund and I was going to be betting $1 million on this prediction market event.
And you win 1.3 million, is you bet $1 million to win 300,000.
If I say yes.
Okay.
My position is that the optics don't add up. I don't think that Anthropic is going to officially announce their IPO in 2026. That would mean that I'm investing, or I'm betting, gambling, $1 million to win $3 million.
Oh, so you're a contrarian.
I'm contrarian on the fact, because of all those things that we mentioned. I think that they are teasing it. That's the way that I'm seeing it. They went from raising this money. So I want to share my view on this, right?
I love it.
Because there's so much. It would be maybe not easy, but I feel like it'd almost be easy to go with the market. For me, it almost feels like the opposite would have even a higher probability. You said you had 68%. I'm honestly feeling more that it being 68% in the other way, just because I feel like that they teased the S1 right after they raised all this money. As you mentioned, they don't need the money. They have plenty of money. It's about that window. SpaceX is the sweetheart of 2026. Right. So when I'm thinking about the next year, 2027, Anthropic, it just sounds right, it looks right, it gives the investors and the owners, the founders, time to hit that $100 billion run rate, it hit profitability, to go past the midterms, go past the holidays, and maybe they do it in Q1 of next year, because also I don't think that they're going to go and say, hey, we are going to put the S1 effective and start going and raising during all of the other publicity that's happening in the world during this time. So you have the Strait of Hormuz, you have September 30th, you have the midterms, you have Thanksgiving, you have Christmas, you have the SpaceX IPO that's gone down, you have the overall AI market that's been a little bit of bearish. So I'm saying, and also I don't think that Dario and Daniela want to go public, not just this year, but if they're forced to, I would say probably the earliest they would do it would be 2027. That's what I'd be making.
All right, Dolan, I want to make you a personal bet of $1.
All right, $1.
That I'm right and you're wrong.
Well, the fun thing about this is that we can do that bet. The fun thing is that we'll be able to look back, we'll throw that into a thumbnail, we'll be able to post this on all of our social media channels and go, who was right, who was wrong, what happened, what did we learn from those things? So that's gonna be worth a lot more than $1, right?
I totally agree. Everything you've said today, love it. I think it's really great what you're doing. I'm honored to be on the show, and thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming, and thank you for the audience for watching. If you found this discussion to be helpful and interesting, I welcome you to like this video and subscribe. We have a new video coming out next week with a new market and a new guest. Thank you all for watching. We will see you in the future. Thanks.